Okay, well, welcome everybody. I think we got a small group, so we don't need a lot of introductions. I'll just turn it over to Chris.
Actually, we're going to turn it over to Greg first. We're going to start with a slideshow from the trip to Chankillo during the Oxford conference, where the two papers that we're discussing.
Anyways, this is a trip of slideshow of our trip to Chankillo during the Oxford. I think it was 9 conference, and
that's what it says.
that's right. And Lima, Peru. This was kind of like the post-conference field trip, and it was pretty amazing. Come on. Ah, there you go. Clive and Ghezzi was the driver of the Jeep I ended up in. We arrived at the hilltop above the Fortified temple, and this is not a small structure. You can actually see it in Google Earth very easily, as well as all the other architecture that's in the Cosmo Valley here. The 13 towers of Chankillo lay in the valley down below, and on the west side there's we're up on top of the hill. Let me say the fortress was just huge. I mean, this is just a matter of, a lot of stone architecture. Ivan given the tour of the site, and then we headed down. This is the western part of the site. On the other side is the much larger eastern part of the site. The Tower Ridge, and this is the general area of the observation area from the western part of the site, the western observation area. Down lower, the architecture is just massive. Again, massive stone architecture, very carefully laid. This all the site dates from about I believe 500 to 200 BCE, so well over 2,000 years old. And these are the mounds, and they appear to have stair steps going up and down each one of them. But I was just truly impressed by the architecture that was available here. Being, from Mesa Verde, looking at the cliff dwellings, how well laid it is and how long it's been there. Of course, one of the things that keeps it there is the Atacama Desert. It's extremely dry. But one of the things that characterized our little trip is that actually we had got measurable rain for like the first time in 10 years. And this is part of the rainstorm coming. This is the long corridor that kind of goes between the Fortified temple and the 13 towers. My camera at the time wasn't big enough to capture the entire ridge close up in one shot, so I had to do it in several. Our tour group, me, of course. But I believe it's the summer solstice sun is on this end, and then the winter solstice sun is up on the other end, coming up over the tower. Comes up over this tower here at winter solstice. Up, I believe, yeah, from the western side. What I found particularly interesting was the state of preservation of the reed matting. This is the wall insulation that was down in the architecture. This is 2,000-year-old, cattails and reeds, still sitting there. This is an end view of one of the towers. There are these very large steps that do go up and over them. You get an idea of the distances that we're looking at. This is the western architecture of the site. And there was this large building down in this area here in front of it. Rainstorm coming in. More views of the towers. And all of us gathered up at the end there. That's what I had.
Nice.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, I think those pictures give you a much better sense than it's just hard to see from the article. I mean, I think the article pictures are great, but you just don't get a sense of the scale of it.
Oh, the site is huge. Like I said, what I would really encourage you to do is go look it up on Google Earth, because literally you can see the site very easily on Google Earth, both sides of it. And it's just a moonscape, or more like Marsscape, in the areas outside of the river valleys. The river valleys are the only areas that are green. That's where all the agriculture is done. And if you just go on Google Earth down these river valleys, you'll find these ancient, huge monster cities. You know, piles of rocks now, but all up and down the rivers. It's incredible.
Thank you. All right, I can jump into what I've prepared. I put some slides together as per usual, just kind of to like guide the conversation.
And I can have some slides too, Chris. So
Okay, perfect. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about why these papers and why this conversation. For me personally, when I started my education in this field at the University of Wales for their cultural astronomy program, one of our first assignments in the archaeoastronomy course was to do a comparison of these two arguments, which was a little intimidating because Kim was still an instructor there at the time. But I think it was a great learning experience, and my purpose of introducing these papers to the Journal Club is not to rehash an old argument or to, come out and say that there was a winner in this. I have a totally different approach to these two papers that I want to show, and through it, how I learned through this exchange. So what I'm gonna talk about with these papers is how does a researcher's approach and their methodology influence their conclusions, and how different fields and different interpretations are affected by the way that we approach a problem. And that's really for me the highlights of these papers. So this is a super oversimplification, and I'm aware of that, but I just on a high level, there's some very important differences in the approach. Kim's approach centered on concepts and techniques of phenomenology, ethnography, and ontology. And these were pretty much the pillars of the way he approached the problem of Chankillo. Ghezzi and Ruggles approached it from a perspective of archaeological excavation, and then trying to contextualize what they found using field measurements, first GPS and compass and clinometer measurements in 2007, and then returning with total station measurements in 2010. So this is, like I said, an oversimplification of two older methodologies, which weren't really, this dichotomy wasn't really at the core of this discussion, but I think, there's some overarching flavor of this left.
Now, as Clive would point out, these are old world versus new world approaches to archaeoastronomy.
Correct. Which I don't think is appropriate in this conversation, but there's some vestiges of it, I think. So I think Kim's approach certainly had a more phenomenological perspective, and this was really introduced into archaeology, I think, with Christopher Tilley and his book, A Phenomenology of Landscape. If you guys have never read it, I think it's a really good groundbreaking work. He talks about the key issue in any phenomenological approach is the manner in which people experience and understand the world. Phenomenology involves the understanding and the description of things as they are experienced by a subject. It is about the relationship between being and being in the world. Being in the world resides in a process of objectification in which people objectify the world by setting themselves apart from it. This results in the creation of a gap and distance in space. So Kim's arguments here that he sets out with at the beginning of the paper, I chose three as what I felt were the most important. Chankillo is embedded within a central Andean cultural area, extending from Cajamarca in the north down to Lake Titicaca, and the site cannot be considered in isolation. Elements of this culture include plazas for public ceremony, the existence of wakas and ushnus, ancestor veneration, mount worship, solar axes, and shamanic movement. And in terms of this conversation, the acts of ascent and descent. And wakas in Andean cosmology are animistic natural entities, meaning they are not inanimate objects, even though they are rocks or mountains. They possess life and extraordinary power and wisdom. And to fully comprehend wakas in an Andean context, you must think ontologically as an Andean. So returning to phenomenology and movement, the action of movement up the Casma Valley to Chavin and through the mountains involves ascent and descent, which were themes in Andean cosmology. This is also often imitated in their architecture, and the stairways were routes to ritual ascent. So there's a passage here from Tejo, the Peruvian, or the father of Peruvian archaeology, the first indigenous archaeologist in South America, where he quotes the movements and the journey of a contemporary shaman in the area. When it does not rain in the mountainous areas and a bad year for agriculture is threatened, the shaman will descend to the coast. There he gathers water, and as he ascends, he will from time to time loose roars that imitate a feline beast. The reference just demonstrating, part of this descending and ascending motion. So ontology was adopted and introduced into archaeology in the 1990s as an inquiry focused on how people from different cultures experience and understand the nature of being. Specific interest in this regard has been given to the ontological outlook of indigenous people and how their outlook tends to differ from a more Western perspective. Basically, learning to look outside of our own Western conceits and understand the culture and the world around us from the perspective of the other culture. Kim quotes Bray in suggesting that a non-Western ontology is needed to understand the meaning of wakas. And they need to be interpreted with great care because they possess a much deeper meaning than inert rocks or sighting devices. So here's a couple of examples of Inca huacas. And you can see in each case there is embedded stairway, a shouldn't say stairways, but what looked to be carved stairs into the rocks in the huacas. Often beer or chicha or water was poured down the huacas to give a sense of motion. And as was stated earlier, they're not just rocks or sighting stones. They're living entities that were revered and were actually treated with motion, with running water and offerings. So Kim's interpretation of the towers of Chankillo are as 13 huacas. The huacas being an important part of Andean architecture and cosmology. And if you compare them with a statement in the Ghezzi and Ruggles paper, there seems to be a point of agreement that the staircase strongly suggests that these surfaces were occupied at special times. The ascension to the tower summits may have been very important ritually, yet because of the staircases are narrow and their length and height vary in proportion to the tower dimensions, several of them are too steep to climb, which is very similar to some of the steps that we have in Mesoamerica and the Maya world, where the steps were ridiculously steep and couldn't be, walked up. They had to be climbed up on hands and knees in almost a bowed, reverential position. So here's a couple other famous photos of carved stairs that have only ritual purposes that don't go anywhere. And the last point here, to make the double stairway of each of the 13 towers are clues to ritual activities which suggest a dynamic rather than static function, that of ascending and descending. Now, my interpretation of Kim's work, and I'm sure he can correct me when I turn the mic over, is that the view that he argued was the important one was from the top of the tower, the motion up and down from the tower. That was the view, at least from this paper, that seemed to take prominence. Now, to contrast that, the Ghezzi and Ruggles methodology started basically with archaeological excavation, which was with Ghezzi's field. And once what he found was uncovered, they went in with GPS and compass clinometer measurements in a survey in 2007, which was followed up in 2010 with total station surveys. From site selection, they put this quote in the paper: "The azimuth of the gaps between the towers, which vary progressively north to south, from approximately 90 to 270 to 120 to 300, suggests something else. That the purpose of the notable variation in the orientation of the tower axis was to orient the gaps between the towers towards a pair of rectangular buildings within a walled enclosure directly to the west." So there is a building there, and the orientation and the curve of the towers, they used as a direction to find this building, what they called the Western Observation Building. Similarly, excavation revealed the foundation of another rectangular room to the east, which is not visible on the surface without excavation, which kind of formed a mirror version of the tooth horizon from the other side. And they called this a hypothetical eastern observation point. So here's the map that they published, just modified a little bit. Here you can see the Western Observation Building that they have identified due to the curvature of the tower. And in this blow up, they talk about the ritual procession through this channel to get to this point where you could actually witness solar events after after a ritual procession. Here's a picture of their excavated building that they call the Eastern Observation Point, where they would view the 13 towers from the other side. So right out of the paper here, I kind of lifted this. The results from the rising sun on the June solstice was to the left of the tower. Right there, it forms this little cradle between the mountain in the distance and the mountain in the foreground. And here, at this point, they where the first step would be on the tower one is they found the fertility offerings in the first step of this tower. Let me just move this stuff here so I can see my screen better. From their eastern observation point, the June solstice sun would have set squarely into the top of the rightmost tower in this position, mirroring the way in which viewed from the western observation position, the December solstice sun would have risen squarely from the top of the rightmost tower, tower 13A. So from their measurements, they determined that the December solstice would rise from above this tower from the one direction and set the June solstice from the other direction. Another observation they made is viewed from the only entrance of the large complex of interconnected rooms, which they call the patio at the east end of the towers. The southernmost tower of 13 marks the setting of the June solstitial sun, right behind tower 13, or to the edge of it. From the western observation building, not looking at the towers, but turning around to what they called the Fortified Temple to the west, also formed an artificial horizon where the sun would set right at the edge of the temple of the pillars. And this representing a form of duality that's found in the Andean culture, and also possibly defining, the perfect place to build an observation building. Another orientation they called out was the rectangular building abutting the northwest side of the observation building is oriented to the top of the southern inner wall of the southern circular building in the Fortified Temple. And this declination, 28.2, they note is very close to the declination of the maximum lunar rise at a major standstill. And here again, they show another 28-degree declination to the entrance of the temple, of the pillars. Typically, I'm always a little skeptical of lunar standstill information, but as Kim mentioned in his paper, along the Andean coast, quite possibly lunar associations were more important than solar in the early Andean cultures. And then they point out that the solstitial limits here are actually also demarked by natural mountain features, which may have been another deciding factor on where to build the fortified temple, which later became the site of Chankillo. So let me go back up here. I just have two more slides for mine. they talk about adding contextuality to their archaeological finds and how that applies to the astronomy. I want to put a quote here up from the Ghezzi Ruggles paper. The redistribution of goods and foodstuffs in a ritual context to create mutual bonds of reciprocity, provide funds and or labor for projects, establish alliances, exchange marriage partners, etc., is one of the strategies universally practiced by leaders of a society to obtain the economic, social, and political advantages that consolidate and produce the inequalities of wealth and status upon which they base their power. So one of the references they use for this is Hayden. It's from a paper called Rich Man, Poor Man, Beggar Man, Chief, put out in 2001. Hayden would go on to further redefine his views, and he put out a book in 2018 called The Power of Ritual in Prehistory, Secret Societies and the Origins of Social Complexity. It's another book which really has affected my thinking as of late. So my last slide I want to put up here before I turn it over is the statement that they make. Sorry about that. Trying to move the toolbar. Like Ghezzi and Ruggles suggest that this represents a rise of an elite class of warrior leaders. And this is based upon the figurines that they found. Hayden would probably have argued differently. From Hayden's theories in his book that he put out, he would argue that this probably represents the existence of a secret society that developed in the Chankillo or the Andean area that leveraged secret and esoteric astronomical knowledge as a means of obtaining and maintaining power within the Andean culture. Not to put words in Hayden's mouth, but this would really fit his theories that he published 7 years later. So that's all that I prepared. Like I said, I know it's going to blow through it quick, but I've had other people here that I would like to hear from, and I didn't want to dominate the conversation all evening. So with that, I'd like to open up to discussion.
Well, maybe this is a good chance for me to say something. The site, as you probably know, has become a World Heritage Site, primarily due to Ghezzi's enthusiasm and the encouragement for people to believe that this was basically a solar observatory, though that's a difficult issue to explore. I think what we have here is a consensus between a combination or a balancing of these two approaches, namely the Andean approach, which I pushed, which involves shamanistic ascent and descent that one finds all through the Peruvian world, of stairways going up and stairways going down. Huacas, which Chris talked about, are characteristically composed of cut stairways, which really go nowhere, but must be symbolic of something, and is probably the idea of ascent and descent. So in the broadest context, I think these towers represent a rather magnificent combination of ascent and descent in terms of ritual processions across them. So my perspective is emphasizing the climbing and ascent and descent of these towers as a ritual experience, rather than observing the towers from a distance on the horizon. And again, one sees ascent and descent as a ritual process throughout the Peruvian world. And there is an old world, new world dichotomy here. And was it Ruggles and Avini really discussed the brown and the green archaeology in terms of one world, the old world, had really very little access to ethnography. They had archaeological objects to measure, but they really had no access to the culture that was that had built them. Whereas in the New World, we have people who have some kind of idea of what their ancestors believed in, and so we have in Peru a very, very rich ethnography put together by Catholic priests who were trying to destroy the religion, ironically, whereas in the old world there's no evidence at all about why certain of these monuments were built. My own feeling is that the fundamental structure that was built in Chankillo was really a ritual procession involving ascent and descent, climbing along these steps. And then after that was built, it was discovered that they might be also used as a calendar or as a device which marked the changing positions of the sun along the horizon throughout the year. If you've looked at the photographs that Ghezzi and Ruggles show us, first off, if you really wanted to build a calendar, you wouldn't have equal spacing of all the towers. The sun, as you all know, speeds up and slows down, and from month to month, the gaps of the towers should be larger or smaller, depending on whether it's solstice or equinox. And I think from an archaeoastronomy viewpoint, one of the tests for the idea of a horizon calendar is, are they rigidly one after another with no difference in separation, or are they do they obviously change with the seasons? Secondly, you'll notice the summer solstice from the west side is not marked. It's a hill, and it really represents a failure on their part to establish these horizon markers throughout the year. Ghezzi and Clive argue that hill is also important and therefore represents a valid marker of solstice, but that really shows you a failure that these markers do not completely cover the entire range of solstice of summer and winter.
Can I just make some points there, Kim?
Sure.
I mean, I think that the mountain probably would have been more important than the towers, wouldn't it? I mean, that's certainly a mindset that I've gotten from you, and the importance of the mountain. And I think maybe from my position, it was a noticing of that might have inspired the building of the towers. I think certainly that the towers and the stairs are representative of huacas, but I think that was probably all designed at the same time, maybe instead of as the calendrical thing as an afterthought. Maybe what have you considered the thought that maybe in an attempt to build this, they thought, well, maybe our markers should be huacas.
Well, I think that's a possibility. The other is this interpretation of a horizon calendar really relies upon the choice of a place to observe it. And in order to make this work, they had to identify arbitrarily a end of a corridor near a square building. If they were, my sense is, if they were intending to build these towers as a calendar device involving sacred wakas, there should be a similarly important place to observe them. And the area has a number of large rectangular structures that would be perfect for getting a group of people to observe the sun or the moon on the horizon. But none of these large rectangular structures work. So they really had to choose a rather insignificant end of a corridor rather than a large observational structure in order to make this work.
But from the Brian Hayden perspective, with the introduction of the thought of like a secret elect few, that would really fit this model, I think, pretty nicely.
Well, Hayden, as you know in his book, discusses not Chankillo but Chavin de Montour, as it's over the hill from Chankillo, and Chavin has everything that Hayden would like in terms of a secret society, namely very, very elaborate labyrinths, dark and scary places where one could have rather dramatic initiation procedures, and it was a major ceremonial site 200 years before Chankillo. So that is a classic example of something that fits Hayden's idea of a secret society. But I can't see how that applies to Chankillo. May I show some slides?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we could go through these fairly quickly. Let's see, because you already have shown not much of them, but this is a view of the whole site of Chankillo, and you can see down at the bottom the fortified temple, and in the middle near the number 3, you can see the teeth of the towers, and then often in number 1, in the far eastern edge of Chankillo, you see a series of rectangular buildings and structures, and you could. This is a massive north. Let's see, just a moment. I need to.
Slideshow.
Yeah, I need to get the slideshow thing, and this is in the way.
I can't help you.
Yep.
There you go.
One
Okay.
over. You're on animations. Yeah, there you go. Slideshow.
Slideshow. Yes.
And then from beginning.
And from the beginning. Yeah. Okay. And here we go. So this is the whole site, and the towers are really a small but very dramatic part of the whole of the region. But let's see. How do I?
Pressure space bar.
Space bar. There we go. Space bar. So as Greg knows, as one approaches the area, the first you see are the sequence of these towers, and both Greg and Chris have shown. Here is the very first tower which you encounter as you move up towards the top of the ridge. You get tower after tower, stairway after stairway. So there's got to be a meaning to these stairways. These are not plain, simple rocks or stone constructions on the horizon. These have at least multiple interpretations. involved, and the stairways are an important part of it. Here are, other examples of carved wakas. This is the mausoleum in Machu Picchu. Here is a stairway going, a ceremonial ritual stairway going below down into the ground from the Temple of the Condor in Machu Picchu. So here is a comment by George Squire, who was really one of the persons who first described Chankillo, and he he isn't any smarter than we are, but he did again have the impression that these were locations of processions of people that would go up and down in along these ritual stairways. And here is, of course, a standard image of the world for the in the Inca world and perhaps pre-Inca world, in terms of three realms that you could visit, one after one, by climbing up or climbing down. Here is a picture, of course, that you have seen from Chris, and again, it is for some of us a disappointment that on the left, the summer solstice misses the tower. It could, if you moved your observation point in another place, then you could get that to mark, but then you'd lose the December solstice sun. The view from the other side is not located so that you could see all the towers, and again, one of them is missing. So it really doesn't succeed as a serious ceremonial construct for a horizon calendar. This is the same diagram which Chris showed, and the most significant feature in the area, other than the temple off on the west, is this very rectangular, this structure, as you can see, which has all sorts of symmetries, and it lies exactly along the line going from solstice to solstice. I don't know if can you see an arrow of mine?
Yeah.
So here we have the Tower 13, and from Tower 13, there actually can walk over to a structure right here, which is not built up, but is walled, and it certainly is part of the ceremonial and ritual activity of the site. And here is that area, and which we photographed back in 2007. And if one is there at the time of June solstice sunset, and here is the photographer's shadow going toward a large rectangular structure, which again I've suggested might be places for people to congregate to observe the phenomenon. In this case, they would see the sun setting over that platform in the direction of December solstice sunrise. The major axis of the site is December solstice sunrise to June solstice sunset. Here is that site, and this is sunset on June solstice, and here is Tower 13, right almost in the middle of this large plaza. Here is Tower 13 as seen from that plaza, and here is the sun, the direct view of the sun setting over Tower 13. So there are multiple phenomena that are taking place, not just a horizon calendar. Here is a view again close to in the late afternoon, taken from the Fortified Temple, where there's a structure in there called the Temple of Four Pillars, and here is here is in fact the one of the rectangular structures, and here is this corridor, small corridor off to the right, which is the place for observing the horizon calendar. And here is the tower 13. So there's a lot going on in Chankillo besides a horizon calendar. And again, I think the compromise interpretation of this, if you want to compromise, is that the towers were first built for an incredible ritual of climbing and descending as you go up this hillside, and then other ceremonial rituals were discovered or developed afterwards, and one has the horizon calendar, if it was actually functioned as that, a consequence of the original attempt, the original design of the towers as being a ritual ascent and descent. Okay.
So can you go back a few slides?
I don't think I can do that.
You just go page up.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
To this one right there.
Yeah, which one? This one?
Yeah. I think this is a good argument about why they're not spaced. Why they're evenly spaced instead of like they would for a lunar calendar. I think the temporal equinox is a good indicator right there, right in the middle. That it's not called equinox, but it's the midpoint of the solstices. And I'm really starting to warm up to the idea that the nadir, the anti-zenith, was actually an important phenomena in the tropics.
It certainly was for the Incas. Yes, we have that.
Yeah, it took me. It's taken me a long time to come to accept that. But I've recently seen some amazing research in the Maya world that is kind of become indisputable for me. And I was kind of an anti-zenith or nadir skeptic for a long time, but I think I'm no longer in that camp, which I find these markers now, kind of remarkable. So for myself, I think they are definitely. I agree with the ritual procession wholeheartedly, but I think they were also intentionally placed.
Hey, Chris, this is Rick. Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, but that might not be the right one to ask it.
No, it relates
Sure.
to the spirit of conversation. So I don't know why you're using the term nadir there. I guess I understand that there are 2 times during the year when the sun is going to find a zenith.
Yes.
But what does nadir have to do with that?
Well, that would be the anti-zenith.
And isn't that just the other time that the sun finds a zenith point?
No, that would be the time when the sun is directly below your feet, like on the other side of the planet.
But I guess for me, observationally, I think I get the idea that there's a plinth and sometime, this is south of the equator. So sometime before the winter solstice, the sun is going to be directly over that plinth. And sometime after the solstice, the sun is going to be directly over that plinth. Isn't that more observational? Isn't that what?
Yes. Now those would both be the zenith. Okay. And it would occur on different days. And this might be the way that they're using the terms here, the way you are. When I use the word anti-zenith or nadir, more cosmologically, you think of the Earth as flat, like they would have. and the zenith would be the point in the tropics when the sun is directly above you and produces no shadow. And the nadir would be its opposite, its polar opposite, when the sun is directly beneath you. And yes, observationally, that's why I was always a skeptic. How could that be even observable? But I've seen some recent evidence lately that,
it's just an interesting concept. I've never sort of been introduced to it before, so that's why I asked. Sounds good.
Yeah, it was one that's taken me a long time to warm up to, that it could actually really be a thing. Kim, maybe you want to talk a little bit more about.
Well, it's a peculiar phenomenon because it's not visible, but it does the azimuth of the anti-zenith sun is indeed a sight line that is found in the Inca world, and it may or may not be a part associated with ritual, but the idea of the three worlds of the zenith, I mean the upper world, lower world being both important, makes it reasonable that they use that as a ritual event during the year.
Interesting. I guess I would also sort of just say in Western culture, the idea of the sun moving through zodiac signs is also unobservable. So it's something you have to understand rather than observe. So.
I have a question regarding the number of towers, 13. I'm not sure if that's addressed a possible reason why there's 13 towers. I wonder if there's any thoughts or insights on the number.
I think the way the conversation heads, if it was, representative of 13 lunar months, like many, lunar calendars are, why would they be spaced evenly? That doesn't work. So I personally doubt that it has to do with lunar months, especially due to the image that we're looking at right now. This image makes everything look like it's not monthly. Like, what's important are the solstices, the temporal equinox, and then that we have actual zenith and nadir markers.
So one interpretation is that these are really the days of the months, and you start out with a new moon and climb temple and tower 1 and gradually work your way along to tower 13 on the day of the full moon. So it could be a monthly lunar processional event.
A follow-up on that, the standstill association with this, I guess I'm curious if you need to adjust your observation point to try and make the standstill interact with the horizon markers.
Well, we're not sure that the standstill really was a phenomenon which they paid attention to here.
Yeah, that's a maybe, right? Because remember, there's no ethnographic evidence of knowledge of lunar standstills pretty much anywhere. Although maybe Ivan Sprock suggests that there might be some orientations in the Maya world, but I still need to come to terms with that. Kim, I have a question for you though. In your paper, one of your strongest arguments, I wouldn't say arguments, one of your things that I think maybe you felt strongest about is the statement on page 159 that a solar observatory is not an acknowledged element of central Andean cosmology. So I think thanks to Belmonte, in subsequent years, we can take the word observatory out of the conversation because we know it's not. Indigenous astronomers didn't use observatories, right? They just built their cosmology into their infrastructure. But do you still think that the solar markers are not, maybe is that a better way to say it? Solar markers are not a part of the Andean cosmology? Because I'm reminded of work I think that you might have participated in with Bob Benford at the Temple of the Fox, the Temple of the, what was it, the Ominous Disc?
Yes.
At Pueblo Bonito, no, what was it? What was that site called?
I forget the name. Yeah. He has a smiling disc and a frowning disc.
Right. Yeah, but that would have predated Chankillo, right? With the same type of solstice marker.
No, I think it's after. It's in the it's after. It's somewhere in the modern century, modern world. I think it's after. It's after Chankillo.
Yeah, because I just wanted for people that might be viewing this, Chankillo dates over 2,000 years ago, and most of the Incan is 1,500 years later, just to get so people have a
Yeah.
Well, this is certainly
a relative time frame that we're looking at. This is pre-Incan, correct?
Very pre-Inca, yes.
Very pre-Incan, so.
Very much so.
And the one thing I would, the observation I have from being there and looking at the place and listening to both points of view, is that when I looked at it, I did not see these as practical structures for people to practically climb over on a ritual basis. My impression was it might be a ascension, the sun traveling up and over a ritual staircase up and over each of these. And just also to add to, we don't have Steve Goldberg or Ivan or Clive here to talk about their viewpoint, but what this is was extensively studied and a committee put together, and the decision through all of that was through ICOMOS and UNESCO that this was I'm not going to use the word observatory, but that's the word they use. This is a solar observatory. And it's, at least since 2021, with the designation, it's kind of a closed case to them. So that is their viewpoint. So we should represent that during this discussion too.
Oh, absolutely.
But that's quite all right. But the site is much bigger.
Oh yeah, no, it's huge. It's amazing.
Than the towers, Craig.
Yes.
Yeah.
And our interpretation of it can evolve too.
Sure.
Yeah, and kind of, Greg, that's the whole reason I wanted to bring this discussion to the table. I'm firmly in the Ruggles and Ghezzi camp that there is something here. But Kim's points that these have deep Andean roots, and there's more to it. These are representative of Huacas is an important key element, and I think to get the whole picture of what's going on at this site, both sides would have taken something out of from the other.
Sure.
I think that was my point. I mean, I don't think out of this debate anybody was wrong, really.
Either.
I agree with that. I think that both arguments are strong, and that they don't necessarily contradict each other, but provide additional input and insight into the site and possible interpretations of it.
You know, and for me, it really comes down to, you know, after all this time, the discrepancy just comes down to the minutia of whether or not they were built first as markers, incorporating a Huaca design, or if they were built first as Huacas, and then somebody noticed that they were aligned this way. And looking back over not necessarily what's come after these papers, but you know, these papers in isolation, that's kind of where I've come down on this argument. You know, there was, like Kim said, there was a lot going on at this site.
So I think that the net result is very, very positive. It being a World Heritage Site has released all sorts of funds for archaeological reconstruction of the site, and so it is nicely protected now. And whether it's one or the other, the net result is good that it's a protected site.
And to circle back to the beginning, the point that I really wanted us to think about, you know, if this was new to you, is how these two interpretations came from totally different angles. And in the end, you know, in 2011, these were very different conclusions based upon very different approaches and methodologies. And then when we do our studies, we need to look at things holistically. That was the point that I was trying to bring to the table with this old discussion.
Yeah, I think the other the way we can apply this to the American Southwest is you have two different processes involved in interpretation, and one, are they really based upon ethnographic material, or is it based upon a Eurocentric approach? And I feel like initially to put together a horizon calendar is more Eurocentric, whereas one involving precessions going up and down is more ethnic, ethnocentric. And you know, we have to while interpreting things in the Southwest, we have to make sure we don't impose upon it our own ethnocentric ideas, and we need to pay attention. Of course, we need to pay attention to the local ethnography for interpretation of these sites.
Well, that's one of the important aspects of our cultural landscape survey program, is to trying to find the balance between a standardized methodological approach of documenting the horizon so that you know, it can be used in cultural resource management, and also to base it and really put it in a strong foundation of consultation and involvement of the Native American and indigenous peoples, because we have to be able to relate this to them.
One needs to use today. Mm-hmm.
We're about an hour into this, so.
Well, yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation in the discussion. Are there any more questions before we wrap it up? Or?
I just want to say thanks for doing this site. I've been really interested in it for many years, and I learned a lot by having it discussed this time. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone who has read these two papers, and I appreciate your interpretation and your reactions. These papers are 10 years old, 15 years old almost. So I was really pleased and surprised, Chris, that you pulled them up.
Well, like I said, it was you know, it was when I first read them, and I was forced to compare the methodologies. And it, you know, it really made me start to think about it, and I thought there was lessons there that we could all learn from. You know, without arguing about who was right, who was wrong, and I think what's the takeaway is much more important than any of that.
Yeah, I want to thank Chris for doing this and bringing these papers forward, and of course for Kim and Ruggles, etc., to put them together and give us a chance to see this. I see no problem personally with suggesting that these structures were built perhaps for a calendar, but done in such a way that they also incorporate the kinds of thinking that Kim is discussing. So I'm real comfortable with
That's my feeling as well.
both on. Yeah.
Yeah, the other dimension, of course, is that both Clive and I presented our papers at the same meeting, and it created a certain flurry of excitement, I must say. And then we also debated our ideas at the site itself.
Always a good thing.
And I saw Clive down at Buenos Aires last whatever it was, November, October, and he said, yes, I agree with you that the large scale orientation of the site is also an important feature of Chankillo. So he and I are good friends.
Of course. Yeah.
All right, good stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Hey, coming up, we have Brian is going to talk about a paper on rock art and astronomy. Can't recall if that's going to be, if he committed to October or November.
I don't think he's committed yet. You suggested October, and we just need to confirm that. But
Okay.
Yeah.
And
as always, we're looking for papers and presenters. So
yes,
let us know if you
I
have something.
probably have something I might be interested in doing in January. But I'd like to leave winter solstice open for anybody who has something relevant to winter solstice that they might want to discuss at that time. So if anybody does, just let me know. Otherwise, I'll put something else together.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Well, thank you, Chris, for putting this together, and the extra slideshows really helped to at least help me get my head around the site. So appreciate that, Greg.
Yeah.
And Kim.
Yes, that was great surprises. All right, well, everybody have a good night then.
All right.
See you next month.
Yep.
See
See
y'all.
you guys. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thanks again for your thoughts.
Thank
Good
you.
night.